So welcome to episode 4 of A Screw Loose. We are super excited to be back again. We've got Kim Durrance from Canada, from the West Coast, far, far away. And we've got Adam Petrie from Atlanta, Georgia, and Rachel Simon from Pennsylvania, and myself, Sarah Stockton from Connecticut. And we have a bunch of player questions to answer tonight. Our usual disclaimers, let me see if I can do this without looking at my notes, of that all of our opinions are our own, and use our advice at your own risk. And we're probably going to change our minds about everything, well, not everything, but some things. And that's okay, and we'll let you know when we do. And oh, what's the last one? Oh, we disagree sometimes.
Yeah, yes. That's cool though.
It's good all agree. Disagree. Okay, anyway.
It'd be so boring if we all agreed on everything.
It would be pretty boring.
You wouldn't need 4 of us to do that.
That is so true. Okay, so the way that this works, for those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time, is I have 4 loose screws. I will drop them the order that they fall in. They are color coded. That tells me who's going to answer what. We each get 30 seconds to give our initial thoughts on each question. And after those 30 seconds, we have a little bit of a free-for-all to wrap things up, and we try very hard to stay in that pattern. It makes for an exciting my brain is broken today. It makes for some sometimes exciting synopses to try to cram everything into 30 seconds, but that is part of the joy of this. So, shall we get started?
Yeah.
All right, let's get it. Okay, so our first question comes from Han, and Han says, can you compare Straubinger versus JS Engineering pads? And those are also known as gold pads, for those of you who do not know that. So our order for this question is going to be Adam, and then Rachel, and then Kim, and then me. All right.
They're both synthetic style pads that have a very constructed interior with a lot of synthetic materials. I actually recently did a video comparison of 2 nearly identical flutes on Flute Forum, where I didn't tell people what it was, and I let people kind of listen to see what they could hear. So you could probably look that up on Flute Forum if you're looking on Facebook, and that would be a good way to just hear the difference for yourself.
Cool.
Yeah, as Adam pointed out, they do have a lot of construction similarities, but also differences too, and that goes same for the acoustics. A lot of folks could hear a difference. Also, something that might be worthy to note for some people is that the Schmidt pad is a vegan pad. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the Straubinger pad is almost completely synthetic, but they do have a traditional bladder skin, which is, you know, is what it is. But if you want a vegan pad, you could go for Schmidt.
Right.
I have one I have 2 in my hand, so what I'll do is I'll show you. The biggest thing is this is the gold pad, and I'll try not to like shake too much. And it has a metal backing on it, whereas the Straubinger has a Delrin plastic backing on it. So one of the other differences is weight. The gold pad is a little bit heavier, and it is less flexible, so it's a lot harder to get completely perfect, so it doesn't go on every flute.
Yes. And that was a great segue, because that's what I was going to say. You know, Adam's sound comparison, somebody else I think recently also did a sound comparison, which interestingly I thought they sounded exactly the opposite, which was kind of blew my mind. Anyway, so the gold pads are so much harder than the Straubingers, because they do have a metal back instead of a plastic back, and that was my time.
Keep going.
They can't be installed on the flutes that they can be well installed on are fewer than Straubingers, and Straubinger pads need to be installed on a flute that has very flat tone holes and a very stable mechanism, and so the Schmidt Golds are even one level past that. So it's actually rare that I recommend that someone get the gold pads, because their flute really just has to be so perfect to have them be successful. Like you can throw them in and be sad, but
I mean, and specifically mechanically perfect, we're talking. Like
Yes.
Right.
the tolerance
Yeah.
of the keys,
Mhm.
especially.
Like I've done a lot of conversions back and forth between them, and the only way that I really find the most success with like the Schmidt gold pads is I have to do a lot of my work in complete darkness, because with Straubinger pads you can still get light through the skin material, whereas the skin material on the gold pads is coated in gold. So when it's sealing, light does not pass through it at all. So if I'm doing one of those conversions, I do all of my tonehole work and all of my padding work at night. So that way I can have complete darkness. And like if you go to my Facebook page and you can like look at my like big picture at the top, either that or on my business page, one of the two, it shows me doing that in one of them, and it's a nighttime picture of what it looks like as it comes through. Because light tells you a lot more with the gold pads than Straubingers do.
Yep.
Because if it seals, there's no light at all. But if it doesn't, you'll see it.
You will.
The other thing to keep in mind is that the gold pads are significantly more expensive. Like the pad itself is significantly more expensive, and because the amount of work involved in making it work properly, you want to make sure that it's important to understand that the time that it's going to take to get an overhaul done or a repad done with those pads is going to be significantly more. So you need to make sure you're talking with your tech about timeline, because it's not the same mold every day for us. It's even if we work with them a lot, the timeline for that, leave at least an extra week that you can prepare to be without your instrument for it to be installed correctly and have it settle properly, because they do settle a little bit and you need to play them and let them sit and make them perfect.
And don't be sad if your tech looks at your flute and tells you that it wouldn't be appropriate for gold pads. They're actually doing you a favor.
Yeah, it doesn't mean your flute is bad at all.
It doesn't mean your flute is bad at all.
It's just not a good match.
It's not a good match.
Right. Usually what it means is we've learned that. Usually what it means is we've learned that lesson the hard way. Is we've thought something would be a good conversion, and then we get there. Even if the install went great, perhaps the keys are a little soft and it's just always out of adjustment.
Yep.
You know, it's any one of 100 things that can make it not be a great candidate. You know?
Or kind of the alternate problem is that someone who's already had gold pads put in by somebody else comes to one of us and is like, I'm just, you know, no one can work on my flute the right way. And I'm like, well,
it might not have been a good match to begin with.
There wasn't a good match to begin with. And then how do you tell somebody, you know, that
we don't want you to be struggling.
We don't like having those conversations. So
the other variable is, just quickly, the other variable, I know again, the other variable is if you play really, really, really hard, these the gold pads may not be a good match for you.
They dent.
They dent and they don't recover. So so it's definitely a flute match and a player match that needs to get made in that. So
cool. All right. All right. Next question is, why do some piccolos have one thumb tonehole and others have two? And I've got Adam, and Adam for the order.
Okay, so I'm going to do my best to make this as simple as possible, because I hate trying to explain the math because I barely understand it. The issue is in piccolos you have a tapered bore in the body, and when they say tapered, it means that it gets smaller toward the end, but it does actually flare back out at the very last end. So it's shaped sort of like, well, I think it's called an ichthus. I call it the Jesus fish. not to be rude about it. Oh crap! Sorry.
It's like,
that was God smacking you down, Adam.
Oh heavens! Okay, let me draw a picture. I'm gonna have to step in and give y'all a picture.
Like a lot. It's shaped like one of those, sort of. And really what it is as the bore gets smaller, you have to have...
Oh, that's too bright.
You have to have basically
There we go.
appropriate ventings for certain notes to speak properly. And because the bore tapers, it changes the pressure points of the notes, because you can actually map out where those exact high and low pressure points are in the bore. So in a cylindrical bore, you can usually get away with a single thumb tone hole instead of a double. But around the turn of the 20th century, there were actually several makers that were experimenting with that. And I know that I've seen some conical piccolos from them. Like I saw a Louis Lot once that had a Briccialdi thumb and a single tone hole for the thumb, and it was a tapered bore. And then that sort of disappeared after the 20s, because I know Kahn and a couple of others had done that. And then Brown out of Germany reintroduced it in the mid 80s, and now they're doing a low C version of that, which is kind of cool. But basically it's an acoustic issue, and if you adjust the way the bore is tapered, changing the angles and the curves, you can change the design from a double tone hole, which is more traditional, to a single. You just have to do a lot of math. So that's the answer in a simple way.
Cool.
Which is a lot of information. So
I have nothing to add other than I would much rather work on a piccolo that only has one thumb pad.
they're easier.
Me three.
They're easier. I've worked on a handful, so they're just rare.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Adam. All right. I was assuming anybody else want to jump in and add anything? No? Okay, moving on. All right. Jennifer asks, what do you do about sticky pad noises? And our order is going to be Rachel, Adam, Kim, and me. All right. Rachel, take it away.
Well, there's a few reasons your pads can be sticky. It could be atmospheric, or it could be from the moisture in the instrument or certain components in the moisture in the instrument. So one of the most proactive things you can do is to just brush your teeth before you play. Like if you are that flutist, or if you've seen that flutist in the bathroom brushing their teeth before rehearsal, that's really a good idea, honestly. And it'll also help preserve the life of your pads as well. So as a technician, I really recommend that. I find that clients who do this have much longer pad life. It shows.
Adam.
Who's next? Oh, it's me. Okay.
Yeah.
So another like sticky related thing is on a lot of the more modern flutes, they have engineered and synthetic pads, and sometimes they can seal so well that they actually get a hermetic or watertight seal. So sometimes what you're actually hearing is the moisture from your breath releasing from the tone hole, and it's not actually something sticky on the pad. Also, don't use toothpaste when you brush your teeth right before you play, because it'll turn your pads whatever color your toothpaste is.
I learned something new. Kim.
What I usually recommend is, if you can actually brush your teeth, just rinse really, really well with water. And I know there's a number of concert bands and orchestras and stuff that have beverage and stuff breaks in rehearsal. I avoid it because it can cause problems. The weather's definitely a major issue, so I would, before you do anything dramatic, I would wait a couple days and see if just letting it dry out changes it, because I've had pads that have stuck one day and then been totally fine a couple days later because just the weather is changing. Here that happens a lot, and everybody kind of just grumbles for like 3 days and then everything goes back to normal. I don't recommend using any sort of powder. I know this is sort of a sticky issue for different techs, but the reality is that powder and water, the powdering concentration ends up equaling paste, and then it embeds in the skin of the pad and the tone hole, and it ends up causing more problems than less. So it's a good solution in an emergency, like the concert's in 2 minutes, but long term it will cause more problems. I know that was more than 30 seconds.
That's okay. I actually forgot to start the timer, so you
I didn't hear any timers going off.
I said it like I realized, and then I just said it for 10 seconds because I was like anyway. Okay. Okay. You can be the cleanest, most toothbrushiest person in the planet and still get sticky pads.
So true.
And I'm going to be the renegade here and say that I drink and eat whatever I want whenever I play. I know,
Sarah,
but I only do it because I know that I can fix it. And I like never have sticky pad problems. So there's also the unicorn factor. Like you may have that friend who just sits there and like drinks a Coke while they're playing and like never has issues, and you do everything right and you still have issues. It's so however, that being said, I don't recommend that people do what I do. Like err on the side of caution. Unless you don't mind giving your flute tech lots of money and taking that gamble. So we should probably use our free-for-all to talk about what to do if you do have sticky pads, not just how to prevent them. So one of the things that we usually recommend is this stuff called pad juice. It seems like they've maybe changed the formula, and maybe it's not quite as unstickifying as it used to be, but it still could help to get your pads to be less sticky. The directions are on the bottle. You can get this at like J.L. Smith, some other places too, I'm sure. Plain old, like I like to use these jumbo end wraps. They're for when people get perms. It's basically like a giant cigarette paper, but there's no gum on it, so you don't have to worry about like, you know, the sticky part of the cigarette paper, and you can buy them in boxes of 1,000, which will last you literally the rest of your existence. Somebody else should say so.
I didn't know those were a thing.
Yeah. And notice I have them right there because I just
I obviously have never had a perm, so I wouldn't.
I use them for everything. I use them for cleaning keys. We need to convert you.
All right, add to cart.
Oh yeah, totally.
Also,
the local beauty place will have them. They're like $3 for 1,000. Seriously.
I can walk to one. There's like a beauty supply depot. Like
Yay.
nice.
Also with the pad juice, sometimes if you do have a contaminant on your pad that's causing the stickiness, the dry paper will not take it off. So in that case, pad juice is very helpful, but you do need to let it dry, because if you just immediately apply it and start playing, you'll be sad because it's moist from the pad juice. So give it several minutes sometimes to dry off, and don't like, because that might be counterproductive. Right. There's actually a fair amount of humidity in your breath, but yeah, just give it a sec. And sometimes I like to do the double whammy. I do the pad juice and then get the cigarette paper and then blot to soak it up, and that'll also help to pull away whatever you need to clean out of the pad, and it'll save you some dry time.
Yeah, usually what I'll put the pad juice on, like I'll fold one of these over, you know, I don't know, maybe like, you know, the size of the hole. Cover this end in pad juice, blah, 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 flip it over, put the dry end in, and blah, 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 blah.
Onomatopoeia for that.
That was the technical terminology. I just gave you someone ever does a transcript.
The other thing is make sure your pads aren't torn or damaged. So talk to your tech, because if your pads are torn or damaged, then they are going to be prone to, or if they're embedded with junk, no amount of cleaning is going to get that, especially if you have like pets. Pets are a major cause of sticking pads, not because we don't love our pets, but they have fur and stuff that just seems to like get lodged in the pads more frequently.
And we are over, but new pads can also be sticky. And it's because the glue that they make the pads with kind of migrates around to the front. At least that's my current working theory. But they just tend to be so sticky sometimes. So you'll see a lot of times, or like, you know, people will be like, I just got my flute back from my tech and like the pads are really sticking. And sometimes it just takes several rounds of doing it with the pad juice or with the
I usually tell people to like wait a week if they're having problems. And if it goes away, that's great. And if they're not, then we'll, you know, step up the next sort of thing.
Yes.
But new pads sometimes are just, they're so clean that I think they stick because they're so clean, and it's just
and
it's so frustrating as technicians too, because we want it to be perfect, and
of course, and we do have a secret arsenal of things that we will do, but we will not tell players about.
Because they can really only be done safely with the key off the instrument, or they involve like harsh chemicals that we don't want to recommend people use necessarily. So
exactly.
yeah, that's why.
So, yes, not because we don't love you.
No, it's to keep you and your instrument
We
safe,
just-
because done wrong, it can cause a lot
Yes.
of damage.
And
So,
yes, and I have done that and then had to replace the pad. So anyway, moving on. Let's see. Okay. So this is a related question. I think we kind of answered Anand's question.
Yeah,
So,
we did. We
yeah,
did. Yeah.
he had asked about
Yes.
cleaning paper, and we said yes, but not
just
powdered.
not the ones that have powder on it.
Exactly.
Just the
All right,
straight cleaning paper.
great. Okay.
An
So
alternative, by the way, is that BG like microfiber thing.
Oh,
yeah.
I
yes.
like those.
Rachel,
Yeah.
show
Do
and
you
tell.
have one?
Yeah, I do.
I
Hold
don't
on.
have
Let me procure it.
Because they are great too. I definitely recommend those.
It's really handy, and especially like if you're playing the piccolo and you have like a bubble in your trill from playing it a lot, just like stick this on. It's so absorbent, and it really does a super job. And you can wash them. Yeah.
Please wash
I'm a
them.
fan. Please wash them.
Please wash
Yeah,
them.
periodically.
And not with any sort of dryer sheets, because it'll stop the absorption.
And then like I buy ultra suede, like the really thick with the
That's
high
basically what
nap.
this is.
I buy that by the yard just because I use it for all kinds of different things. So if you know people that do a lot of sewing and they might have scraps left over, or you can also get like a lot of those polishing cloths and then they just get kind of tired to wash it really well, and then you can just cut a little piece out. That's what I use, those little strips of that I'll just, as you can see, I cut things out, that works well.
If you use the microfiber ones, make sure it's one that doesn't have any chemicals in it. So it's just a microfiber cloth, not one that has like a silver polishing compound or anything embedded in it. Just a plain cloth. Wash it really, really well a couple times and then use it if you're going to.
that would be counterproductive. Yes.
Yes, let's apply chemicals to that. No,
Yes.
wait.
No, bad idea. All right. Next question.
Yeah.
All right. So Martha wants to know. She says, on my vertical bass flute, it's a Kingma vertical bass with a low B foot joint and trill keys. Something is vibrating on the fifth line F. If I press the two large keys that are engaged with the right hand first finger, the vibrating stops. Thanks. All right, let's see what our order is. It's going to be Rachel, and then me, and then Adam, and then Kim.
Well, so when your flute is buzzing, we found through our work that the most common cause is microscopic gnomes in the mechanism. I'm just kidding, but the reason we're saying that is because sometimes buzzes can be very hard to track down and replicate, so sometimes it can kind of feel like that. However, that said, the three most common causes are a mechanical interference, like a key hitting another key, and it can be just very slight. If it's just really, really close, it's enough to vibrate sympathetically. Also, pad skins are another one, because a lot of pad skins are double layered too, and a loose spring. Yep. Also gnomes.
Also gnomes.
So ask me how I spent my day.
How's your day, Sarah?
So the other major cause for vibrations is if you know someone who was a prankster in life and they have recently passed away and you pissed them off, they are probably haunting your flute. But really, I spent a lot of my day today actually tracking down a buzz on a flute, and we can go through the things that I tried. Well, I say we because I tried for a few hours and then I called in
the troops.
With the troops.
It's good to have friends when you have tough buzzes.
So good to have friends. So yeah, we came up with a very creative list of things to check, but we'll get into that later. Adam.
Well, I mean, kind of like Sarah says, there are days where I think that instruments are just filled with demons that are just sent to taunt me. And buzzes are one of those things, because you can find it in like 5 seconds, or you can look for 5 days, and it's just a crapshoot. So
4 years.
I mean, I get maybe one bass flute a year. So the only other thing I would guess is maybe that you might either have a misadjustment or you can like an adjustment paper coming loose. I would really let a tech hunt this down. But not mine.
Do it.
All right, Kim.
Having also got to play the "Hey, why does my flute buzz" game this week, um, the other thing is that sometimes, not so much grommets, also called bushings, that hold the open holes pads in place, but there's a screws and washers, and sometimes there are little mischievous gnomes that go in the evening and unscrew those a little. Over time, they can sometimes back it out, or the pad, if it's new, can compress a little bit and then it's loose. So that is another great fun thing to track down.
Yes. So
So many things.
let me just go through all of the things that I tried today.
I mean, you activated the emergency phone tree. Is what
I did. I did. Okay.
Yes.
So I was getting a really, really loud buzz. It was on a flute that has gold pads installed in it, which normally we can rule out the pad skins buzzing on that because I think so. Anyway, but they're
the
thicker.
skins are to the inner cushion. They're
Yeah,
actually,
that should be okay. Yeah. Okay.
doesn't move.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So my approach to tracking down a buzz is to basically strip the flute back to like nothing, or start out with the whole flute and start taking parts off of it, and then keep playing and seeing if the buzz is still there. So like I narrowed it down till I knew it was something in the left hand, or so I thought. So I was checking springs in the cradles. I was checking the since it has gold pads, it has plastic stabilizers glued into the key cups. So I found like a couple loose stabilizers. So I glued those back in firmly. It was not that. I checked all of the screws. I tightened all of the springs and all of the posts. I cleaned out all of the spring cradles. I like unhooked one spring at a time and saw if that made a difference. I like rehooked all of the springs. And then I started taking more keys off and plugging things with plastic rubber plugs until I got it down. So like I was like looking to see if like a rib had come unsoldered, or like maybe it was, I tried a different head joint. I like checked the rings. I mean, I plugged every single hole in the flute to see if there was
Gnomes.
an up tone hole. I
You
had
even checked the
checks
little
for
spring
gnomes.
hole G sharp.
yes, I blew out like
Yes.
fuzz from like, everything I could think of. And then after like
no.
hours of this, I finally went, and of course by then I'd finished the COA last night. Finished. It was sounding great. It was awesome. And then it started to buzz. And so today it was supposed to go home, but it did not. So finally at the end of today, I put the whole thing back together and I was like, all right, you know what? Let me at least get it playing again the way that I had it last night. And so then I played it for like 10 minutes and it stopped buzzing. And I don't know why.
It healed.
I have a flute that is actually currently here for an overhaul, ironically, that had this mysterious buzz for 3 years and it just went away. So I hope it doesn't come back.
So I have something very important to add to all of this.
Yes,
for our viewers. If you are a flutist and you have a buzz and you want to take it to your technician, here's what you do. So as you can see, because these are often very intermittent and so specific when it happens, we love notes because we'll try to replicate it ourselves. But as you know, sometimes it comes and goes, and one week it'll be there, and then suddenly it'll just disappear for you. So if you have any notes, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. Like Martha did a super job. She's like, this specific note when I hold these keys and also this key, and I was like, that really like helps us kind of like narrow a focus on like where the gremlin could be. So that's really helpful. Don't be afraid to say that, and don't be afraid to bring us buzzes. We're all joking a lot because they're tricky to do, but we deal with this a lot. It's a very common problem, and we have a whole bag of tricks to try, which Sarah has already tried today.
And then it's also important to like in your notes make notes about like dynamics and things, because
absolutely
the way you blow into the instrument changes the way the air flows through it, and it changes the way it vibrates. Completely. So like I had one where I could not find it, but then the player came in and played it and I heard it immediately. And then but I was able to watch her play. So then I was like, hand me your flute. I did the same thing. I got it to buzz and I was able to fix it almost immediately.
Yes. And like
the other sorry, go.
Okay, that's okay.
No.
So similarly, like I was trying out piccolos once, and two of the exact same model, and the first one I picked up, like the buzz was so loud, I literally like flinched as soon as I played it because it hurt my ears that badly. And you know, right? I was like, ah, and the person who was there with me, they're like, what? I was like, here, oh, try this, right? And they're like, what? I'm like, what do you mean what? I pick it up, I'm like, ah, and they're like, hi.
Yeah, we all have our own different acoustic that we're transmitting to the flute, which has its own acoustic too. So
Yes.
so yeah, that's where like even if you're thinking, I only hear it when I play high F really loudly, like just tell us that. I promise we won't think you're crazy. That's just how it goes.
No.
And we do eventually fix the buzzes. We're kind of making a big deal out of how horrible they are today, but like they're fixable.
It does take some time to track them down. The other really quick thing to double check is make sure your crown's not loose. Because a loose crown can cause it to sound like you have clanky keys, but also if the crown is loose or inside the actual, there's like a washer that goes on. If that is loose, that will also cause a really weird buzz, and it only happens on some notes on some days. It's a tricky one too, but it is one of the first things I always double check. If something feels funny, I always check the crown first just in case it's backed off, because sometimes they do.
And sometimes it doesn't sound like it's coming from the crown. Like it could sound like it's coming from
I've never had it sound like it was coming from the crown.
No,
it sounds like it's coming from the G's or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
This reminds me
I once had an instance where it was this phantom buzz, and it was the music stand by my desk. It wasn't actually the instrument.
That's just mean.
I had that.
Well, that's like Adam was like,
Where's
Sarah,
something else in the shop?
Did you go to a different room? I was like, I've been in the bathroom because like the traffic next to my window is too loud and I have to hear this.
Yeah, I could not find it, and I was just like walking around playing it, and I realized as I got to one part of the room, the buzz got worse. And that's when I figured out it was the music stand vibrating.
The gnomes were in the music stand this time.
They were. Oh God. Okay,
Anyway,
talk about buzzes forever, but shall we go on?
Yeah, great question.
All right, that was a really good question. Touched a nerve, Martha.
We're glad you asked.
We are so glad you asked. I needed to unload a little bit. All right, Chuck, my friendly neighbor, incidentally, asks or says, I have a beach gig coming up. What could happen if I get sand in or on my flute? Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so the order is going to be Rachel, me, Kim, and then Adam.
Oh, I hope you don't get sand in the flute. That would be, I mean, I've never played the flute on a beach before. I mean, it sounds really lovely in theory, but it probably is not safe for a flute. Unless if you've got a student model flute that's like a backup, and then maybe get it cleaned afterwards if you think something got on there. But it is kind of a hazardous situation no matter how careful you are. Yeah, as idyllic as that sounds, playing flute on the beach.
All right. So yes, so say you do take your flute to the beach. Here's what could happen. If there is a little bit of a breeze and there's a little bit of grit flying through the air, I mean, think about where you find sand in your bits when you come home.
Bits on the show.
Sand also has bits, and it's equally uncomfortable. So it could get in the pads. You could end up with abrasive on your pad skin. You could end up with grit in your mechanism. It's going to eat. I mean, it's sandpaper on moving parts that are.
It's salt.
And salt. Okay, Kim, go.
Having played a couple outdoor venues where you end up with sand and like just dust, it takes months to get it out of the mechanism. I've had people come in. I play like a really expensive, like $200 flute outside, but I have like 6 months later been still wiping grit out. It can be really expensive. Really expensive. Have a backup. Buy a backup. A cheap one. A $20 eBay one. Any flute. Beach flute.
Adam,
please.
I can honestly say I've only ever seen one flute that's been to the beach, but it was like really at the beach because it was on a boat that sank in a hurricane.
Wait, is that
And
the
it made
beach?
it to you?
And it was underwater for almost a year.
Flute in a bottle.
So obviously, like, and it was a step-up flute. So obviously,
So
like,
Would
it
you
was
recommend
replaced.
that as a maintenance technique?
If you want to retire an instrument permanently.
Okay.
Did it wash ashore? Like, what happened?
No, they pulled up the wreckage of the boat.
Wow.
But yeah, so anyway,
That's cool.
I would not take your good flute outside. I once had a client who, she did it just for a picture, and I didn't know that when I saw it, but I had just done a COA on her 14-karat Miyazawa, and she had it on the beach, and I about had a cow because I was just like, oh no, this can't be good. But it was only out of its case for like the photo, and then it was done. I was like, okay, that makes me feel way better. And then the next big thing I saw her doing, she was rollerblading with one of those wind defender things, which if you're playing on the beach might be a good idea. But she was just seeing if they worked, so she went rollerblading with wind defender and played Flight of the Bumblebee as she did so. I was like, you're really cool.
But
Please don't fall.
With the 14K?
No. It was like a fluter thing. But oh no, I
That's
really
insanely cool.
but no,
I think I
just
saw that
don't
video.
take a good flute out there. Don't
Way to
take a
go.
good flute out there, and you know, like the wind defender thing might be helpful because there's wind at the beach.
Well, it
That's
won't
true.
protect you against grit, though.
It's
It will protect you
Yeah.
against grit as well as it will protect you against COVID.
I would recommend one of those little fife things from one of the manufacturers that is $10 and doesn't have keys, and you could go underwater with it. If you're going to the beach, take something that if something really horrible happened, it would be okay.
And
Because beaches are unpredictable.
slip and fall.
Yes, and I do want to back up because I know that I was a little bit snarky there, but the wind defender is awesome for what it was designed for. Like, buy it for that purpose.
There you go. Yeah.
Yes, but it probably won't protect you from getting the beach in your flute. But it'll make you sound good while you're at the beach.
Right, your $20 flute at the
Easier.
beach. Yes.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
was- yeah.
Get one of those little fifes.
Yeah, cool.
Even better.
Awesome. All right, onward.
Mm-hmm.
All right, onward. Let's see. We've got Jennifer. Oh, we kind of touched on this. We've got Jennifer asking or saying, declaring, I do not screw down the head joint crown firmly, but leave it a little bit loose on the theory that perhaps a firm attachment might dampen the flute's resonance a tiny bit. Do you have thoughts on that? Do we want to? Yeah, let's go. Let's briefly run through that. I know Kim already addressed it.
I mean, I can also add something that might be unexpected, but I do have some customers that like to play with their crown unthreaded slightly.
Yep.
And there's one flute where I do really notice a particular difference. So I understand, but it is a buzz risk. So what I've done before is I've melted some beeswax on the threads just to help prevent any sympathetic vibrations from the crown being on the threads and not being fully seated. But yeah, if you are having a buzz and that's something that you like to do, you might try to screw the crown back in and see if the buzz goes away.
And a little bit of hot melt glue also does that. It does the same thing. If you're having a little bit of a buzz when it's just slightly unscrewed, but you like how it plays better, you know, just a little tiny bit will be good for that. But also, I mean, the thought process behind that whole idea is basically at points of contact between multiple pieces, you have energy that's passing through the instrument, and the goal is for the sound wave to have the smoothest surface by which it can travel. So if joints are fit too tightly, it's kind of like the sound wave is doing a race in an earthquake. So that's kind of, if you give them a little bit of breathing room, it just calms everything down.
Yeah. So just to piggyback on that, because I do a lot of designing of custom crowns, and I have measured so many crowns because I need to know what's going to fit what. There is a really big difference in how different manufacturers fit their crowns onto their flutes. So if you are like, oh, this works really well for my friend, it might not work well for you. And the same thing, you'll see people who have like le freaks, you know, connecting their crown to their head joint, trying to do the same thing that like Adam was talking about, you know, and whether that works scientifically or not. Follow your ears.
If it works for them, it works.
Follow
for
your
them.
ears.
Follow your ears.
Exactly.
I make no claims on purpose as to whether my crowns affect your sound, because I don't know if they're going to affect your sound. And right now we don't have science to say definitively one way or the other. Right now it says no, it doesn't affect the sound. But as players, we all know that sometimes we experience things that don't match what the science says it should do, and that's a whole big debate as to why.
I have 3 different crowns on that yes. I rotate through on my flute, and I think they make a difference sometimes.
Yes, and
maybe.
Yeah, and I've been totally convinced that they make a difference, and then
or
I'll
not.
blind test, and then I find that I can't pick it out of the lineup, but when I can see it, it totally makes a difference. Oh, so.
We've all experienced
the one thing,
it,
the one thing I would like to, getting back to the keeping them loose,
yes,
and securing them if they are going to be loose, so they're not cranked down, to make sure that, please do not use Loctite ever.
Oh, that'll make us sad.
Or crazy glue or anything like that, because you want something that can be reversed, because we need to be able to get the crown off to be able to remove the head joint, because the cork that's in your head joint absolutely must, in all situations, be able to go through the bottom of the head joint, because it's tapered. It cannot come out the top. And sometimes it's because the metal disc that if you look down the head joint, you can actually see the metal disc, is actually bigger than the top of the head joint. So please do not use Loctite, crazy glue, anything that is permanent or even semi-permanent. You want something that can actually be unthreaded by hand, but is just going to secure it a little bit. So beeswax, the Teflon tape, stuff like that is good.
Yeah.
Yep.
But please do not use anything like glues, please.
Yep. Cool.
It causes much anxiety.
Yeah. All right. Shall we, next question?
Yeah,
great. That's cool. Well, I'm glad we free for all on that one, because that was cool. All right. Arlene says, I have problems with my joints being very tight. Any thoughts on that? And my first thought was, well, yoga.
You?
But I assume you're talking about your flute joints. So let's go with Rachel, and then Adam, and then Kim, and then me. All right, Rachel.
Well, the tenon fits can be adjusted. So if they're really consistently tight and not just tight sometimes, then they might just need to be adjusted. If they're only tight sometimes, you might just need to clean it. Also, some materials are more prone to kind of getting a little bit grabby. So that's definitely a factor as well.
Cool. Adam?
Also take a second to actually look at the tenons that are occurring, because sometimes you can get scratches that are starting to form. So if it starts getting worse and worse and worse, stop. And then if it's a piccolo, make sure you're using cork grease. That's very important, and that you're cleaning it off after every time you put it on, because otherwise it's just getting gooey and gross.
Yeah, making sure that it's clean, making sure there's no grit there. Wiping your tenons down after you play, before you assemble them and disassemble them, is really important, just because you can get grit in there. Going back to the beach question, that's why it can be so dangerous, because if you get any grit or anything in any of the head joints or anything, it can shred, very literally, your head joint in one assembly, and it is catastrophic. So making sure that the joints are clean, just a clean dry cloth is excellent for everyday use.
Yes. I would also say that if you are having trouble with it getting tighter and tighter over time, and you're a person who likes to leave your flute out on a peg all of the time, make sure that you still disassemble it every time you're done playing, and wipe the tenons, especially if you have pets in your house, or kids who are coming in and outside. Like if there's any kind of like environmental, like dust, debris, whatever, even if you have a cover on your flute, it can still get up in there. So clean.
Right, especially like if you have, in that circumstance, if your head joint and your body, or your body and your foot joint, are different materials from one another. If they're left in current contact with each other and that moisture just gets in there and sits, they can corrode together. So like a lot of times that'll happen with people that have like a solid silver head joint with a plated body, because the plated bodies are usually some form of brass under there, and brass does oxidize and corrode slowly in those circumstances.
And also tenon fits are beyond them being secure to the flute. It's a very like personal thing, and it's okay to have a different preference. Like your flute just might have been built to have tighter tenons than you prefer. Like for example, what I like for my tenons is I really don't like to strain my hands in any way, and so I like them to be just really easy to take on and off. And some players might be like, oh, that feels loose, but I know it's not going to fall off, but we all have our different preferences. I have a customer also who one time she had her foot joint get so loose that it fell off, and that was really scary and inconvenient to say the least. And so she wants the foot joint really tight, like tighter than I would put it, but she's like, nope, tighter please. And she was really like, she's just grateful to know that it's not coming off. That's okay too.
When I was in high school,
sorry.
I was going to say just a loose foot joint story, just to horrify everyone. So I was standing on one side of the band room and had my flute, by the barrel, so it was safe, but I was using my hands and talking animatedly, and all of a sudden I see my foot joint go like sailing across the band room, and I run over and I pick it up, and the B key is like think, like
And in that same vein, when I
can laugh now, but
when I was in high school in marching band, there was a girl that liked to have her flute joints really, really like easy to put together and come apart. And it was a marching band show that we had to do like these different things, and all that. And I remember once she walked on with the whole flute and she walked off with just the body joint. They had to go track down the rest of her flute before the football team did.
Oh my. Yeah, that's too loose. That's right. It's got to be at least staying together.
That was too loose. But,
Yeah. All right, Kim, what did you want to?
The other consideration is temperature. For those who do not, like myself, have air conditioning, temperature can definitely, and even like humidity, you wouldn't think so, but temperature and humidity can change how they fit. So if you find that it's only happens in a certain type of weather, that's just something to kind of make a note of. And you may just have to work it into your life that it's going to be tight or loose, and just be aware of it.
Yep. Or maybe just have your technician adjust it to like split the difference so that it doesn't ever get so tight, Maybe it's a little looser than you like it sometimes, but it's still, like Rachel said, stays.
I have a gold flute, a client with a gold flute that we just kind of have to find a middle ground, because it's very, very tight sometimes, and it's almost falling off the other 6 months of the year. Yeah.
All right.
Gnomes.
So gnomes. This episode brought to you by gnomes. Our next question is from multiple people. How often should one have a COA, and what does that even mean? All right. First up is Rachel.
Again.
I know, and then me.
Sure.
Oh, so who fell on the floor? Kim.
Adam.
And then Adam.
Okay.
Sorry, Kim.
It's okay.
The bruises will heal.
Little.
I'll just make sure to take all the good answers.
Good.
So,
Go.
Yeah, how often you need a COA, it does depend on a lot of factors, including how often you play, how many hours you put in, and what sort of player you are. That we all are kind of different in how our flutes wear. So I usually make an individual recommendation, but if I was to be general, it's really a good idea to think about it in like 12 to 16 month intervals. That's good for most regular flute players. Am I at 30?
Yeah, bing, bing. All right.
Right.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Yeah. Exactly what Rachel said. I have some clients who either because they play so much or they your skin chemistry can also affect how long your keys can go in between getting fresh oil. How hard you press on the keys makes a difference. So I have people who I recommend come every 6 months and their flute is happiest every 6 months. And I have some people who I see every 2 years and like their flute is still doing okay, but I wouldn't really stretch longer than that, just because the oil can get gunky. And then what that means is it gets thick and the keys stop going up and down and that causes problems, which someone else will talk about. So Kim.
This is sort of like the how often do I have to go to the dentist question. It's actually a really good way to think of it because so much depends on the individual player. For student instruments, for students in band, I usually recommend they get at least a good checkup every year. Professional players, I have professional players that book in every 6 to 8 months. I don't recommend going longer than 18 months for regardless of who you are. And we can modify a COA if it doesn't need a full one. So we can modify things for you.
Right. Adam.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that just because
what is a COA? We didn't answer.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
COA is short for clean oil and adjust. So if you think of it in terms of a car, it's like getting your oil changed, fluids topped off, tires rotated. So if you go too long, you're not saving yourself money, you're just spending more later. And I mean, the only thing that I really have to add is with that is like with piccolos, every now and then people that will play a lot, I'll see them every 6 months as seasons change. But you know, it depends on how much wear and tear you actually put on it. But more than a year and a half, and you're really starting to cause damage. You're just causing things to wear prematurely on the insides, and that's when you get yourself in a lot of mechanical problems.
So I want to also add though, because I know that there are people watching who will be saying, but I've had my flute since 1973 and it's been fine the whole time. So most of the time when I see a flute that has those claims made about it, flutes will train you to play around them. So yeah.
It's very gradual. You don't necessarily, it's not suddenly like, oh wow, it's just not right today. Sometimes, I mean, sometimes it's like that. But a lot of the times it's just like a slow, like just a little bit, and you just think, gosh, I'm like having a bad flute day today. Or something.
Yeah.
Boy, this articulation is just, I need to practice more.
Yep. And then you get used to it. And then finally it gets so bad, or you look at it and all of your pads are ripped, or, you know, it's been 15 years and you go, oh, I guess I should. And then you bring it to one of us who our job is every single day to make flutes play as well as they possibly can. And so we are used to being so like, we do not want to work. Like if we have to squeeze, it's
very sensitive. We are trained to be very sensitive.
Yeah. And so, you know, we get a flute like that and it's like, haha, I can't get anything below an egg to come out. You know, and then, you know, the person will take it and be like, no, it's fine. And we're like, okay.
You don't need to work that hard.
You don't need to work that hard.
Let us help you.
Yeah. So it's bad for your hands. It's bad for your tendons. It's bad for your neck.
Bad for your jaw.
For your jaw. It's bad for your flute because that oil isn't lubricating anymore. It's actually become the opposite. It's now actually like sanding away the insides of your keys. So it's just because you can doesn't mean that you should. So
well, and flutes, all the parts that make the flute sound beautiful, like aka the pads and the adjustment materials that are used to set the regulation of the keys, they're all virtually organic materials, and they do change with pressure and time and humidity, and so they do change. And so you either get used to it and have to suffer through it, or you can take it to get readjusted according to where it's at right now, and that really will just help you it'll just make your job so much more enjoyable.
Yeah. And I know, like, So all of us have more than enough work. So we're not saying this because we need
Right.
more work.
We're not trying to solicit, we promise.
We're not trying to like if I had someone cancel
I'm good.
last week on me and I was like, oh my god, hi, I have
Just
room
because
to
of the
catch up.
time, that's all.
Like, I'm not telling you to cancel either, but when it happens once in a while, like we're not short on work. So when someone comes in and they have a COA booked and I look at their flute and I'm like, you know what? It really doesn't need any adjusting. Like, okay, you know, maybe I'll tweak the F sharp a little bit, but other than that, it's really doing great. I will clean it, I will oil it, and I will only bill for whatever time it took me to do that. I'm not going to charge you for a whole COA just for the sake of charging you for a full COA. I don't know, maybe I'm too ethical, but like I have no interest.
I do this. I do the exact same.
Yeah.
I had one like that this past week. It was coming in for some like a tenon repair, and I was like, it's really playing really well. It could use a COA because it's been a year, but I was like, it's doing really well.
Yeah.
Yep. So we just did the one-off repair, and then they came and picked it up. So.
Yep.
We'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
One of the things I'd like to address, because it's actually in our feed right now on Facebook, so, and I was going to talk about it anyway, is how a COA varies between tech to tech. One of the things that is really important to know is that COAs, clean oil and adjusts, it's good to have a really good dialogue with your tech about what that actually means for them, because yes, we use the term in North America to mean a very sort of like a general thing, but talk to your tech about what specifically a clean oil and adjust means. Some techs mean that they're also going to clean the keys and polish it and make it shiny. Some don't, so the pricing can be different there. Sometimes a certain number of pads are included, sometimes they aren't. The other thing that's really important, having come out of a retail environment into a professional flute tech environment, is it's important to understand that COAs are a flute technician provided service. It is entirely different than if you take your flute, especially student flutes or intermediate flutes, into the place that you bought it and say, hey, can you check it over? That is not a COA. That is general service, and it addresses just what's fundamentally wrong at that moment. It's not preventative care. It's not cleaning out the old oil, putting new oil in. So it's important to understand that a COA is something that is provided by flute technicians. Now, sometimes there are flute technicians that do work in retail stores. So, but generally, if you just hand your flute off to a general tech at a retail location and go, hey, can you look at my flute? You will not be given a COA. So it's really important to dialogue explicitly with your tech. And we like being really open and honest about that kind of stuff. So we aren't going to be offended. If your tech is offended by you asking what they're going to do, pick another tech. And I say that with a lot of love and a lot of concern as a player, because we expect to be asked.
We want you.
We
a good tech will want that question.
We want you to know. Yeah. So if your tech is not open and honest and kind of is a bit dodging on that, they may have a really good reason, but be comfortable with your tech. You're trusting them with a lot of stuff. Most of these instruments are more than just our instruments. You're trusting them with a huge thing. So ask all the questions. But that's the biggest thing. Pricing was the other question. That's going to depend on your region and everything like that. So talk to your techs, and that is part of the dialogue.
Yes.
Yeah, we want to be asked questions because we like talking about this stuff, as evidenced by
No.
Yes.
Yeah, ask us questions because we like people investing in the experience, because it builds a relationship. And then once you have that dialogue open, it allows the technician to really tailor their service more to you. Whereas if you're jumping from tech to tech every 1 or 2 years, you don't ever get that kind of relationship.
The other thing is, if you do happen to live in 2 different or work in 2 different areas and you are sharing techs, that's totally great. Actually, some of us share clients back and forth, and that's totally fine. But invite it to be a conversation so that both of the texts also talk to each other, because it's really good if we're all on the same page, so we know, oh, you know what, I did this thing last time, I was going to do this, but it wasn't quite ready, so that we can all give you the best service as a team. Because if we can work together as a team, you as the player are the one that wins. So don't be it's not a bad thing necessarily, especially if you spend a lot of time in 2 different locations or 3 different locations. But just have us all on board so that we can have a good dialogue about that and make sure that we're able to provide you the best service and care for your instrument that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because most of the time we already know each other.
Yeah.
And if we
Yeah.
we're happy and if not, we're happy to get to know each other.
Yes.
And most of the time we like each other too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
It's a pretty small community. Like the professional flute world is pretty small. So I mean, dialogue with us. If we don't know them, we'll reach out to them. That's part of what we do.
Yes. And I think that is a fabulous note to end on, because
It is.
believe it or not, it's 9:09.
Wow.
I know.
Really? Already?
We did it again,
Yeah.
guys. We did it again.
Yay.
Lost track of time.
So, wow. I love doing this with you guys. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's watching.
Thank you.
Thank you
love
so much. If you could head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe over there, that would help us out a whole lot. And we had been making noises about Patreon. That is still in the works. We'll keep you updated on that. And we'll be back next week with more exciting questions, because we still didn't get through all of them. But
We
please,
got to like
please send us
half of
more.
them.
We did, yeah. So please send us more.
Send more.
Send more questions.
Send more. Send more. All right. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for spending some time with us. Bye.